Good morning and welcome to our June AEE chapter meeting. We're glad you joined us this morning, and I know that we have an excellent webinar laid out for you today. We're going to focus on student chapters. Many of you have student chapters. More of you have thought about having student chapters, and today we're going to answer every single question that you might have ever had about student chapters. Well, we're going to do our best for sure to do that. As always, when you have a question, we'd like for you to enter the question bar over on the right-hand side of the screen and write it down. We'll handle the questions at the end of the presentation after our three speakers that are going to talk about student chapters. But first, let's hear from Michelle Whitlock on updates from AEE. Michelle?
Thank you, Bob, and thanks for kicking this off. I am excited to be able to provide a few more updates for you guys since our last chapter webinar. I will follow up from this webinar with an email kind of highlighting these, but just real quick, our marketing department and I guess creative director has made brand guidelines and marketing guidelines available. So you're now able to, it's in this huge PowerPoint and Dropbox file, download logos, images, different web banners, graphics, even as far as what fonts we use, if you want to tie into the AEE brand, and just some real, I guess, guidance and tips and advice on how you can market your chapter and AEE altogether. And then I wanted to remind everybody about the Zoom accounts we have for virtual chapter meetings. Ironically, we are using GoToWebinar for this, but we're in the middle of switching all of our AEE, I guess, communications to Zoom. So it will likely be that the next chapter webinar is on Zoom. So just look out for that. And if you haven't set up your Zoom account yet with your chapter, just reach out to me and I'll be happy to help you with that. 2 deadline reminders. So chapter recognition awards and student chapter awards were due in June, but with the COVID pandemic and students being out of school, people not being able to go to their office, and AEE World has now been postponed from September, we felt it was almost necessary to extend these deadlines. So we're giving you until July 3rd to get in your award nominations for both chapter recognition and the student chapters. So if you have questions about that, you can reach out. And then final reminder, our AEE West virtual conference is coming up next week. It is 100% virtual on a brand new platform. We've never done this before, so we're kind of excited and nervous, hoping it all goes well. If you want to register for that, you can go to west.aeecenter.org or reach out if you have any questions or anything about that. And that is it.
Okay, Michelle, thanks for that great update. We appreciate that. I've signed up for next week's seminar and I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be fun. Next up, we have Alan, who's going to talk about international student chapters. Alan, I'm turning it over to you at this time.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Michelle, for this opportunity. I'm really glad to be with you here today to talk about the really good growth and success we have been seeing for in our international student chapters. So I'm going to share with you a small presentation. Can you see it, guys?
Yes.
Okay. So as I said, this has been a phenomenal year for AEE's international student chapters. We grow from 20 or 21 student chapters by end of 2019, early 2019. Now we are at 27. We had 6 new chapters. So despite all the circumstances of COVID-19 and all the situation, we managed to add 6 new chapters. We had for the first time a new student chapter in Latin America, in Brazil. We had 4 new student chapters in Jordan. And now we are working on 4 potential chapters, one in Eastern and Central Europe, one in Middle East, one in Western Europe. It's going to be the first of its kind in Western Europe, in Paris, France, and another one in Latin America. So we have been busy on the international platform. This is a list of our 27 accredited student chapters worldwide. The strategy we have been using to promote and to encourage universities to join our international student chapter community is based on 3 steps, actually. So it's based on motivation, engagement, and achievement. We have been going visiting universities before COVID-19. We have been doing on-campus visits to universities. And after COVID-19, we have been discussing with faculty advisors and students and doing it through webinars to encourage them to start new student chapters. So for the motivation, it's always a good idea to highlight the benefits of becoming an AEE student chapter. So as an AEE student member, you get leadership growth by joining a network of international and national energy experts. You get greater exposure. Also, you get discounts on training programs, AE training programs. You get access to great publications, also discounts on books. So in order to motivate students, we highlight, we encourage them, and we show them that just by paying smaller fees for in exchange of becoming an AE member, you get a lot of benefits. And actually, it has been working a lot for us. A lot of students are being encouraged. They see that the fees paid for AE is minimal, and in exchange, they get a lot of benefits from having access to journals, webinars, discounts on training. So the payback on this membership is like immediate in some cases. For the engagement, we divide the engagement into 2 parts. The first part is the engagement with AE Center. And in this case, we encourage our student members and student chapters to participate and submit nominations for the awards, AE Student Awards, to submit for travel grants, to participate whenever they can in AE conferences, regional or international, and to be part of this huge network of energy professionals. As for the engagement with local AE chapters, actually this relationship is very important for student chapters, and it allows students to also be part of this local network within their country, within their campus, and to participate in the energy field, to participate in conferences, local conferences and trade shows, to make contacts with people, and being part of this network gives them an opportunity, for example, to find internships or maybe job opportunities when they graduate. Also, on the other side, we encourage chapters to provide student chapters with free technical support and free trainings and webinars whenever they can. And this is also a great push for students and student chapters, and it helps them to be prepared to enter the energy market later on when they graduate. As for the achievement, they offer several programs. So you have the awards, the program. So it can highlight, or it can be awarding for people who work as students within their chapters, who do some achievements. So the awarding program highlights those achievements. For people who are looking to publish some scientific publication, AE can help on this matter. They can also publish or present posters during conferences like the AE World Conference. And as I said, they can find internships, jobs, and also it's very important for some students in the international community that gives them access to scholarships through the AE Foundation and the Al Tuman Scholarship Program. So as international assistant director for student affairs, what I've been doing to help student chapters, to give them ideas, to help them to be involved in this international community, I've been issuing a quarterly newsletter. In this newsletter, I always tend to put new news about the new chapters, activities done by chapters, and this news can be used by other chapters. It can give them new ideas to what to do as a student chapter, how to be creative, and it highlights the achievements of our international student chapters. Also, I've worked with AE and Michelle, and we have increased this year the AE award program from 4 to 6. So we added 2 new awards: the best conference and exhibition, and the best social media campaign, because a lot of our students have been excelling and being distinguished in this in preparing for conferences or exhibitions, and maybe for webinars, and they have been very active on social media. Another thing, I'm also working on a training or a webinar for our international student chapters. So it's gonna be oriented towards the how to help them to sustain these chapters, because it's a big challenge for most of our international student chapters to maintain the members, because most of these guys join the chapter, but very soon or soon enough they graduate and they leave, and maybe they join the local chapter or not. So we're trying to develop a webinar, a training webinar for our student chapters to help them maintain the membership and to be sustainable and to overcome everything. I just want to remind our attendees that they can see all the posts about our national and international student chapters on our LinkedIn page. So it's AE Student Member Group. So please follow this page to encourage our students and to be updated about all activities. Thank you.
Wow, John. Alan, thanks. That's a great perspective of what's going on internationally at this point in time. Let's shift now to the U.S. student chapters, and Mr. John Lloyd is going to take over now and talk to us a little bit about what's going on in the United States.
All right, thank you, Bob. Yeah, that presentation by Elaine was really quite good, and it's a tough act to follow. But in the United States, we're definitely working on student chapters all around the country. I didn't prepare the kind of presentation that Elaine has, but I really wanted to give people some motivational thoughts regarding student chapters. And then really the most important part of this whole agenda today, I believe, is going to be the Q&A section. So my experience with student chapters, I'm the immediate past president of the National Capital Chapter, and we have 3 student chapters that we have worked with for many years. However, the thing about student chapters is that they are one of the most wonderful challenges and most rewarding, difficult things that you will ever be involved with. But one of the real difficulties is they come and they go. They're very elusive. They're not something that you can say you've set it up and put it on its feet and it's going to stand forever. It's going to stay as long as there are appropriate champions to keep it in place. We've had, in the case of our George Mason University chapter, we had a student who was just incredibly motivated, and he had one of his parents was a chapter member, and they were willing to help be the mentor. So it was kind of a unique father-son relationship, and that chapter continued on for 5 years after he graduated. But now that chapter really is pretty much no longer in existence. And it's unfortunate, but it's just a condition of student chapters. If I had one piece of advice to people I would give you regarding student chapters is don't give up hope, be persistent, focus your attention on what you can do in the future. And you can rely on the past and say how great it was, but the past, it is a condition of student chapters that students graduate and they move on. And so you can't rely on that foundation that you build one year to be in place the next year or 2 or 3 years later. It is never too late, or never too early, never too early to start talking about a succession plan. It's hard because you have a brand new student president and the student chapter may be new itself. And one of the first things that you need to make sure you talk to that student about is, when you graduate, what's going to happen to this chapter? Who are you going to hand it off to? Who is the student that's at least 1 year further away from graduation than you are, that's going to take this chapter over and make sure it doesn't disappear? Because, you know, if everything goes well and the way it's supposed to, you're going to graduate. So to put it into another school, our George Washington University chapter, it's still out there and it's still doing reasonably well, though the membership is low. The original cohort of students at George Washington University, it was about 6 or 7 students who just loved what they were doing. They loved a certain class. They spent a lot of time together. They had a natural overlap. You know, their load profile was perfect. It fit what AEE does. And so they just really fell right into making a student chapter. And at the same time, George Washington University was rebuilding their engineering building, their physical plant. It's a beautiful new building. It's got great facilities, and these students were just highly motivated. And so, you know, what another possibility besides having this one student who happens to have a close relationship, whether it's a family or some other professional relationship to an AEE chapter member, you might just have a core group of students who are excited about it. And that can be a really powerful way to get a student chapter going. But the third student chapter that we worked with is the one that I think came out of the gate with the most power and the most longevity. And it's now facing what I would say a real challenge. Doesn't mean that they won't overcome it, but let me explain what I mean. And Jared, I don't want to steal any of his thunder, so I'm only going to touch on it briefly. But the way that the student chapter at the University of Maryland came into play is there was a nice combination of some students, mostly graduate students, and a professor who were doing a laboratory class. So they spent a lot of time together outside of lecture setting and a lot of time together in laboratory setting. They put together the solar house competition project. They did some other things that were very interesting that I'll leave to if Jared decides to touch on those. But what caused the student chapter to really just go from 0 to 60 in no time was that the professor said, if you're going to be in my laboratory class, my master's graduate level laboratory class, you will join AEE because you need to have an association to your future profession. You need to have the commitment that it has to you. You need to grow and learn. You need to have networking and mentoring. And this is the fit. This is the fit that we're going to put in place here. Now, she has, you know, earned a promotion and moved to a different position. And so the challenge is now, will there be a continuing champion in the staff at the University of Maryland? And I won't touch any further on that, but my point here is, regardless of the pathway that you may find yourself going down on the way towards the student chapter, you need several things. And you need to have a chapter that's excited about supporting students. And you have to put your money where your mouth is. You have to be willing to pay for students to do activities. You have to be willing to let students join your activities for free or as low cost as you can. You may even have to pay students registration fees. Another thing that I have noticed, and it's just an observation, the students that are native to the United States, that are US citizens, are often less motivated than international students who attend US schools. I don't know why that is. It's just an observation. But if you have a group of international students at a US school, you may find that that is a place to look for students who are excited to get this thing together. Another thing you really need, you need a professional mentor who has a connection to whatever school it is, who lives nearby, who maybe was an alumni, who maybe is willing to just devote some time to be physically present. But you have to have a full-time appointed position or elected position, but somebody whose job it is to be the chapter mentor. And probably the single most important thing you need is you have to have a staff member at this school. And more helpful than not is to have an actual tenured professor, not just an associate professor or a member of the facilities department, a tenured, full-time, full professor to be in charge of it. They are like mini gods on the campus of their school. And if they have their support behind it, it will be successful. So that's the end of my time. And really, like I said, just some thoughts. And I hope that was helpful. And we'll do some more of the statistical data like Elaine had maybe later in the future. You're a good man. Thank you for putting the pressure on.
Thank you very much, John. I appreciate that. Good insight. So we're gonna spin the camera over to our third bearded presenter today. If you have noticed, there is a theme here. I didn't make get the memo, but anyway, we've got some great input. I'm looking for your questions. I haven't found any yet, and we're going to go into questions here when Jared finishes up. So Jared, talk to us about chapter mentor perspective, because that is, as John has said, is a very critical part of any student chapter.
Sure. Thanks, Bob. Again, kudos to Elon's presentation and just an outline of things that have worked really well. Elements of that have been successful at our Maryland chapter. So it's great to see that it's being applied as a model across the world. And John, thank you for the framework setup. There's a couple things I wanted to highlight that we had as a success at Maryland. John mentioned a few of these as a topical, idea, but we really, first and foremost, establishing a faculty mentor support is if you don't have that, you're going to have a very, very hard time. We had a tenured professor and an associate professor that worked with him that both were just very excited to get this group started. This is a group that didn't exist 2.5 years ago. We set it up in February of 2018. So it's already gone from just an idea to being able to do a bunch of wonderful events, get students jobs, help them connect to professional networks. Many of them are already coming back as active alumni to that club, which is a reward that we couldn't have seen. But really the foundation of it all has been that we've had a person on campus who has clout, who can get us rooms for conferences and meetings, who cares about the students' well-being after they graduate, that is acting as our liaison on the faculty side. That's first and foremost something we got to have. One thing we did at the Maryland campus was we used one of the laboratory groups. It was a lot of graduate students, but it's a mix of undergrad and graduate students as sort of the foundation for membership. And so, as John mentioned, with every year, you have people graduating, leaving, becoming more active, less active. Maybe their priorities have changed with clubs and studies and jobs. Luckily, this group, this lab group has, 1 to 5 new students coming in every year. So there's always a new person or a new group of people that's interested. And there's a now precedent on coming into this lab group, getting involved with AEE and picking up the baton and running with it. Having that as a foundation to then go out to the broader campus and say, hey, we have this core group of people. Maybe you're not in our lab or in our department, but if you'd like to join this group, please come around. Setting expectations early in terms of roles, responsibilities for the students and for myself as the professional mentor was crucial. John mentioned having a succession plan. We've talked about that. We have elections every January and September. Sometimes students graduate, odd semesters. So when the roles need to be filled, someone steps up. That's helped at least keep the officer position stable. And then in terms of having our faculty mentor move on to a promotional job and now having that turnover, we're dealing with that right now. And so we're trying to meet that challenge head on. It's the first time we've dealt with it, but we're confident that we'll be able to kind of realign with the new leadership. And then with the students, you really, to keep people coming back and to keep people engaged, you have to first identify their passions and their interests. We have an event at Maryland called Maryland Day in May, where the campus opens up to the general public in about I don't know, upwards of 50,000 people have attended this on a single day, and all the clubs are out on campus. It's a big party, a big welcoming, and the students were adamant about getting their foot in the door with the club. So the very first year, they designed and built a solar powered water pump where you could block the sun with your hands and it would prevent water from pumping up. And then when you would let the sun hit it, it would shoot water up in the air. And it was one of the most it was one of the most like favorite for a lot of the young kids that were there with families that day. Everybody like talked about it, and it was just something they wanted to do. That was their passion, so they did that. It wasn't something that we planned to do when we started the club. So it's important to connect students with their passions and interests and then align those with opportunities. John's mentioned that the National Capital Chapter does what it can, and it does a great job of supporting the student chapters in our region with conference opportunities, certification opportunities. We provide a CEM class at a substantial discount to students to encourage them to take the class for the CEM while they're still in school, instead of waiting to get out of school. And several of my former students have benefited from that greatly. And it's been crucial to them getting jobs to have that certification, even as an EMIT in hand when they graduate. I mean, you can't put a price on that. And then just the general networks being available. There are 20 some odd volunteer officers on the NCC chapter that have just welcomed the students with open arms. They've made sure that they're connecting with them when they go to events. Maryland itself has hosted several key events that our chapters put on. And so it just becomes, growing the network to include the student chapters themselves rather than them being kind of one-off connections, just having them be in the normal. Those are the main things we've seen as success. I'm very proud of what the students have done the last 2.5 years. And I think I'll leave it to questions now. So back to you, Bob and Michelle.
Okay, Jared, thanks again. Wow. I like the idea of that solar pump. That would have got my attention too. I like things like that. Michelle, I've been looking for questions from this august group that has been receiving all this information, and either my computer is not getting any, or these guys have done such a great job that no one has a question. Have you been able to pick up any questions there from your end, Michelle?
Yes, I do see a few that have come in. I can start if you want me to.
Yes, please.
So it says, Pauline from Kenya, is it possible to form a student chapter with students from different universities since we cannot find enough interested student members from one university? Helen, do you want to talk about that, or do you want me to kind of give some input?
No, as long as I know, you can't form a student chapter unless you have at least 10 members from the same university as members in AEE. So unfortunately, Pauline, I don't think you can do that, but I'm sure you can. As I said, you can follow the plan, so you have enough motivation for students to join in AEE and become AEE student members. By joining, you're paying minimal fees, but you're gaining a lot. So by promoting these benefits, I'm sure that any student would be interested to join, and you gain a lot by forming a student chapter. It helps you in your career. It helps you to develop your leadership skills. What we have been doing here in Lebanon, I'm going to talk a little bit about our own experience. We have been trying to get students involved in the events organized by our national chapter. So we're giving them some roles, we're putting them at the front so they can get some experience on how to organize events, about presentation skills, how to communicate with people, to get exposure. So I think it's if you promote these benefits and you talk about them, I'm sure you can find another 9 students and you can form the first student chapter in Kenya, and I'll be glad to help you with that whenever you want. So, thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Next question, Michelle.
Okay, so Peter asked, where do you get the funding to pay for the student CEM training?
Oh, excellent question. So we actually take it out of our operating budget. I mean, we do events that we have professional people pay to attend. We have job fairs. We have sometimes expos for vendors in association with events, which have registration fees. Long story short, you have to scrape it together, but whatever funding that your chapter uses to pay for any of your needs. I mean, everybody probably has some kind of a website that has fees. Everybody probably has some kind of a communication and member management system that you are going to pay fees for. I mean, whatever fees you have, however you gather that money to pay your fees, what I would say, and I don't really, it's not a one size fits all answer, but you have to just say, this is part of our budget. We have a fixed cost. It is going to be part of our budget. We have to figure out a way to pay for it. And then whatever your revenue streams are, I mean, you can't obviously budget $10,000 for a student chapter if you don't have $10,000. We don't budget $10,000 for our student chapter. Our student chapters have been very conservative in the whatever budget request they have asked for. And you know, when we do our CEM courses in particular, whereas a CEM can be an opportunity for a chapter to have some revenue because you get to set up a discount through the national organization and offer the course so that you pay in such a way that you can have some opportunity there. We just cut our margins. We basically say whatever a professional charge is, they're going to help offset the cost of the students. And we basically make the students only pay the test fee. We want them to have some skin in the game and have it be something that they believe has a real value to it, but we don't want any barrier to entry. So that may not have been the answer you were looking for, but you just have to make it a priority and you have to find the money.
Sorry, may I add something to what John said? I can share with you an idea that, or something that we did here also in Lebanon. So what we did for the CEM, we got the alumni to participate in the CEM training. So the alumni were paying for the full course, okay? And the students got the chance to participate and paying minimal fee because the alumni covered all the expenses of the trainers, the venues, the material, everything. So actually the students were like add-ons to the course and they had only to pay minimal, really minimal fees, so to just cover few expenses. So it's like just having a CEM course for them, and it was like free for students, and the alumni were sponsoring this the CEM training. So it can also be a way to fund a CEM for student chapters.
Okay. Michelle, I'm not sure if we have any more questions or not. We're running a little bit of overtime. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, there is one more.
Please, go ahead. Go ahead, Wendy.
What motivated the Maryland professor to force students to join AEE?
All right, Jared.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, Dr. Singer was great. She was, I mean, without her, John can attest to this too. We worked together with her for over 2 years, and a lot of this stuff, the successes of the group ran through her. And she just kind of, you know, from her own experiences when she was in school, she remembered that some of the most enriching and productive times were the time she spent outside the classroom, outside the lab, and those hours are very minimal. But what she put into it came back many times over in returns in terms of these sorts of networks like AEE presents for students. So, you know, she made it a principle early on because she was around for the founding of the chapter that if you're going to be in my lab and my lab's going to center around this, you need to spend a few hours a week if you can doing this as well. And no one really pushed back. I mean, it wasn't, I think they looked forward to it, honestly. It's its own social group, you know, it's its own socialization. And, you know, it wasn't a hard sell from what I saw.
Yeah, and I think another piece of that is that she took the perspective that she was teaching the whole student, that she wasn't just educating a student about how to do engineering calculations and how to apply the engineering calculations to laboratory setting experiments, but that this student is going to go on and be a professional, and they're going to be in the workforce, and they're going to need to have connections to professionals in the workforce. They need to find themselves permanent employment, and that the best and the most productive way to do that is to be in a professional association that gives students that exposure right out of the gate. And I think it would be very easy for any professor on any campus to justify educating the whole student in such a manner, and it wouldn't get any resistance from the dean of students or from the provost or any college or university representative.
Good point. Very good point, John. Well, all right. Great webinar today. Outstanding. Michelle, I want to thank you, Alan, for your input. John, of course, for yours, and Jared for the good words that you had to share. Each and every one of us on the that are listening in, join us again in August, same time, same place. And Michelle may have a little bit different way for us to connect, but there'll be information put out about that and how that'll happen. Once again, thanks to everyone out there who participated, and especially thanks to our presenters today. That concludes our webinar for today. Thank you very much.